Some of our favorite things to do with Halo recently is jumping on Halo PC, changing just one line of code that allows the acrophobia skull to be implemented into Halo 1, 2, and 3 ODST, and we of course already played through it in Halo 3, and then see what happens if we just zoom through the Halo game as quickly as possible. We've had some very interesting things happen when you play through the game way faster than you're actually intended to play through the game. We've had complete levels just break and not work properly, and finally, after taking way too long to finally get to it, we decided to try to beat Halo 3 ODST, but way too fast. How does the acrophobia skull impact a playthrough of Halo 3 ODST, and what happens when you just kind of zoom along? Well, we decided to give it a go, and things were a little bit interesting. So starting things off on Prepare to Drop, we did find a little bit of entertainment out of the fact that we could actually prevent ourselves from crash landing on the ground, and for the most part we were just trying to get our bearings with using the skull for the first time in ODST. We kind of zoomed straight to the door that we typically go in through when we're making our way up to the next area to finish off this early level, but of course it was closed, and then we went to the phones that we typically have to answer so that we can get Virgil online, but the phones weren't ringing, so then we were convinced it was something we had done from playing through the level too quickly, but we had forgotten we just are supposed to kill the enemies first, so we had to reset the level multiple times because we were convinced in our head based off of our previous experiences using the acrophobia skull that we had messed something up. But after that, we did continue to try to zoom through the rest of this level, though interestingly enough, Mombasa Streets actually has this invisible ceiling pretty low to the ground compared to Halo 3, for example. So as badly as we wanted to just fly over walls and doors and explore certain areas, we were very limited to the more linear path that is expected with ODST and Mombasa Streets. Either way, after completing this level, we went to Tayari Plaza, and it was very hilarious just because this level is already a short level if you just run straight through it, but having the acrophobia skull just adds this whole extra level to speed. I mean, we just cruised through this level at lightning fast speed. We ended up going so fast that the dialogue between Buck and Dare was still going on and overlapped into the cutscene where Buck is removing the door from the drop pod to find no Dare inside. It's actually really funny, so just take a quick look at this.
Listen carefully. If I don't make it...
Whoa! Hang on,
I'm here.
I'll be right there.
I got you.
Too late, they spotted me.
Damn it, no! Veronica, talk to me. Don't move. I'm coming, you hear?
Oh, nuts.
We were off to the races on Mombasa Streets, which was pretty much just us following where we were supposed to go and finding the clue as quickly as possible. But of course, with that ceiling, we were pretty limited, and this in general was the main experience we had for every single Mombasa Streets level. So it's a bit of a rinse and repeat, so we might actually skip over the rest of the details between each Mombasa level. But Uplift Reserve was definitely something else. Now, this is a level also that we know the speedrunning route for, because if you don't remember, we're the former third place holder champion for Halo 3 ODST speedrunning, and we held that co-op rank for a couple of hours. But we still more or less knew the speedrunning route, and getting to just fly over everything and jump over the rocks by using acrophobia was kind of interesting. Though at the later part of the level, there was a lot of confusion because there are these kind of janky invisible walls by the rocks when you're flying straight up the large hill. And that was one thing I noticed right away, is when we were flying up, you don't realize how high up the upper area from the ending section of this level really is unless you just go straight up vertically. But nonetheless, even though Luke had an incident with an invisible wall, I was able to fling my way to the area where you normally launch off in a Warthog and complete this level. Kazingo Boulevard, the level that you typically use a tank on, we said nah to the tank, and we decided to fly through as quickly as possible. When we got to the area where we reunited with Dutch, things started to get a little bit weird. The phantoms started acting really awkwardly, like they were clipping through each other, likely because we triggered multiple sequences at the same time. And we know from this area we have to take out the wraiths before you can proceed. But even after we took out the wraiths, we still had to wait a bit. We didn't really know what was wrong, but as it turned out, we had to wait for those phantoms to finally leave before the door opened. And then when the door did open, we flew all the way over to where the firefight section happens at the end of the level. But for whatever reason, Dutch did not want to move up and push forward into the next area and deload the last area. So we ended up going back to escort Dutch back into the later section of this level. But nonetheless, he finally did show up and from there we just kind of flew around, killing all the enemies that came from that firefight holdout section. On Oni Alpha site, we ran into a couple problems a few times on this level where we would just like slam into walls and die, but once we got sorted through that, we quickly triggered the explosives on the bridge and hit the thing, and since we did it so quickly, the bridge exploded and there still were a bunch of Marines on the bridge, so whoops. Though once we did fall back a little bit, flying does make it a little bit easier to take out the wraiths. And for the most part, the rest of the level is pretty standard, where you just kind of have to sit around and do the firefight section on the inside of Alpha Site, though we could now fly all the way up to the top area and stand in this random room. I think it's used for grunt spawns in firefight mode. And then we did try to see if we could fly just past the section and go straight up the elevator shaft, and while we tried that and we could get to the door that was all the way up there that typically gives you access to the roof, you can't actually do anything unless the elevator is there with you. So after the firefight section ended, we hit the button on the elevator, flew straight up to the top, and we just sat there and waited. We saw the buggers spawn in, and they kind of just fought the buggers for us. And then when the elevator finally did reach our feet, the door opened and we were on the outside part, and from there we killed a couple enemies, and I was able to fly up to the Pelican and end the level just a couple of seconds faster. NMPD HQ is a pretty standard level. Interestingly enough, you don't actually have full reign to just fly wherever you want. There's a ton of invisible walls everywhere. There were some parts that were connected rooftop areas and you could fly from one to the other, but for the most part we did have to go through the level the main way as you typically would. We could fly across that beam all the way to the helipad and from there just do the firefight thing, but I was kind of disappointed. I wanted to explore a bit more while we were already waiting there during the firefight section, and there's not really that many places you can go to. Kikawani Station was next, and this level already is surprisingly fast if you're just trying to speed right through it. But now that you don't even need a Banshee and you're faster than the speed of a Banshee just by pressing the A button, or in Luke's case, the spacebar, we managed to just fly through everything incredibly quickly. There was one moment though where the Phantom that had the ODSTs in it wasn't moving up, and I had to fly backwards just to look at the Phantom real quick, and then it just started moving up once I looked at it, so that was kind of funny. But from there we just skipped the Scarab altogether because you can just open the door and pass that, threw a grenade at those squid houses, and boom, Kikawani Station was also done. Okay, this next level was surprisingly difficult, which was Data Hive. Now, Data Hive already is, you know, tight corridors, long hallways, but when you're going at this super fast acrophobia velocity, it becomes something else with all of these desks and server type things blocking your way. It literally kind of plays a little bit like Temple Run, and we definitely died a few times just slamming into things because we were trying to get through it as fast as possible. After meeting up with Dare, it did get a little bit better when we got to the bigger areas, and we were able to fly upwards and skip the little elevator section, going straight up to the scaffolding bridge thing that's up atop. And I think along the way we actually caused some enemies not to spawn in, but we were going so fast we didn't actually take time to pay too much attention to it. We did make our way down to the area where Virgil is and quickly took out the brutes, flying into the area where Virgil was. Then to escort him out, we kind of just flew past everything and then just waited at the door where he typically comes over and unlocks it, and boom, eventually he just kind of respawned there and opened up the door for us. So it was surprisingly easy. Okay, we were incredibly excited about Coastal Highway because this level is so focused on vehicles, and in general just being able to play this level without having to use a vehicle was something we were kind of looking forward to, though we weren't ruling out the possibility of us still using a vehicle if we wanted to. But first, there is the section where you have to run over through the little streets of Mombasa in the early morning, and we kind of just flew past everything once again and just waited by the door for Virgil to show up, and he did. He just kind of respawned there. Buck and Dare were still fighting away at some enemies or taking their time, but Virgil opened the door for Luke and I, so we just kind of left without them. From there, we were in the city section where typically you take a warthog to defend the Oliphant, but instead we just flew to the end of the street, and while we know there are speedrunning techniques to somehow bypass the waiting around, we had no idea how to pull off the strategies. There's invisible barriers around everything that's beyond just the main road pretty much. So while it was a little frustrating because we were hoping we could just zoom came straight down the road to where the zoo parking lot is, where this whole level ends. We still had to play it the normal way. And then we got to the final firefight section where we had to defend until the waves of enemies pass and the Phantom comes to pick us up. This one was just kind of chaotic because Luke and I were just flying around and trying to get the drop on enemies, which probably isn't the way you're supposed to play this level, but still, it kind of worked out. There was this moment where I hijacked the turret in a Phantom, but I guess my ODST was so heavy the Phantom didn't want to fly away, and it kind of just got stuck here in this corner until I finally dropped out, and that was kind of funny. But ultimately, this level was pretty easy to actually beat, and all in all, we were very surprised with ODST, with how little the game actually did fall apart with the speed we were going in. It's very likely that over the years, Bungie got a lot better at how they managed the loading sequences and load triggers in Halo 3 ODST compared to some of the older Halo games, and for the most part, it just didn't seem like things fell apart when we moved too fast or didn't have our feet necessarily on the ground. Still, it was really fun to play through ODST, and we had a time of around 1 hour and 30 minutes to play through the entire campaign with the Acrophobia skull on, which obviously is much faster than how a typical player would play through ODST, though somehow we still managed to take 30 minutes longer than the speedrunner who has the record for ODST on easy difficulty. So there's probably some strategies out there that could have saved us some time that we just didn't know about. But hey, we tried. But if you like this video, do double check you are subscribed to Rocket Sloth for more videos like this. You can also check out the other videos that we've done with the Acrophobia skull on before, because in those games, some things really interesting would happen if we went too fast that we did not expect at all. But that's it for today. We'll see you guys all next time with a brand new upload.